This is our interview with Anita Nile. We're going to begin by asking you some questions about your service in the legislature. But just to set the record straight, what years did you serve in the House?
74 to 84.
So you were there for 10 years?
Yes.
Okay, and you were in the House the whole time?
Yes.
Didn't move back and forth or anything? Are you a Democrat or a Republican?
I'm a Democrat.
Uh-huh. And we're asking everyone, why did you affiliate with that party, and when did you affiliate with it?
Well, I was born a Republican, and that's true, born a Republican. My mother and father were both staunch Republicans, and my mother was a county committee woman or something, I've forgotten, and she was very active in county politics, and so I just always assumed I would be a Republican forever and ever. And then I got married, and I was married in June, and I hadn't. I came here as a bride, and our banker in Lebo was running for senator on write-in votes, and you know your banker is pretty important on the farm. You should know. So they asked me if I still hadn't committed, you know, what I was going to be in the election, and they said, if you really ought to register as a Democrat and vote for him, and then you can always change back. So that made sense, dollars and cents. And so I was involved in politics in a minor sort of way because my mother was. I thought it was the thing to do. And so I got to looking into what they each stood for, sort of, you know, and how they stood on the issues. And I decided they were both working for the same thing, and I just never did change back.
Well, that's really interesting. It's quite a story. Now, what year did you get married?
41. And I was 21 and 41.
So that would have been your first election you could have voted to. So you never did get to vote as a Republican?
No. About killed my mother.
Did your husband have any strong political affiliations?
Well, he was a Democrat, and a pretty strong Democrat, but he didn't live and breathe politics.
Well, then you ran for election, and how did you happen to run that first time? What happened?
Well, since my mother was always instrumental in getting involved in whatever was going on, I thought that was what women were supposed to do. So I got involved in county politics over here as a Democrat, and I was county committee woman at that time, and we needed someone to run for representative, and I went over the county beating on doors asking for people to run. I couldn't get any takers, and finally someone said, why don't you run? You've been asking us to run. And I thought, well, I will, it's only fair, but I have 3 strikes against me. I'm a Democrat, and I'm a woman, and what was the other one? Anyway, I said, I'll never win, but I'll do it. And I had a primary contest, and I won that. That wasn't really very hard because the fellow wasn't anybody much. And I had opponents in the regular election, and I was probably the most surprised person of all when I won, you know, but I worked hard.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, when you say you worked hard, what kind of electioneering, what kind of campaigning, I guess I should say,
Well,
did you do?
let me tell you, I knew little about campaigning. Little. I was teaching school. I had 3 children still at home, and I never worked so hard in my life because you're a teacher. You know what you have to do to be a teacher. And I taught at Osage, drove back and forth, and in the nice days I would come home and rush on out, go door to door. And it was quite a territory. It went from, about 15 miles east to, you know where I-35 is in Elmdale? It went on past Elmdale. I had all that. And on the weekends, I'd be out door to door in the country and in town.
So you're door-to-dooring type of thing is
yes.
what you...
And what signs I put up were, you know, you go to the drugstore and get this poster board, and I made my own signs. I always knew there'd be some use for my art class I took in college. And believe me, that was a cheapie.
Well, who encouraged you to run, or who helped you in your elections?
Nobody helped me. I was like the little red hen.
Really?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Well, as a Democrat committee woman, did they support you then in the...
Well, they supported me, but Democrats have no money. And I didn't have enough political knowledge to have people form committees and go out and help me. You know, I'm sure they would have, but I just didn't know enough about it. That's how green I was.
Well, did your parents, were they still living, and did they help you? Or?
Oh, no. No. My father was deceased at that time. And, no.
Your mother was a Republican, so she...
Yeah.
Did she live around here?
She lived at Reading, which is about 16 miles away.
Oh, that's interesting. Who did campaign for you? Anyone? I mean, you just went door to door yourself, just after school.
Did you raise any money from anybody?
People gave me, there was that. I have a good friend in Mrs. Johnny Bourne, who now lives in Lebo. She lived out here on Frog Creek. We have a little community we call Frog Creek Community. And she said, Anita, if you win the primary, I'll have a dinner for you. And she's a good cook, and I thought she was just meant to have it in her own home. Well, she was thinking otherwise, and she had a dinner in the schoolroom, lunchroom of the school, and sold tickets. I forgot how much.
Oh, my goodness.
And that's kind of unusual to have something like that in the school, because if we looked into it, it probably wouldn't have been legal or something, you know. And they turned out pretty well, and that's the only funding I had other than my own. I put my own money in, which wasn't much. This was a very skimpy shoestring. And some people did give me $10 or $5. There were very few of those.
Well, you ran for office 5 times if you were there 10 years. Were all your elections about the same like that, or did you vary your...
Once I didn't have an opponent. One election, And I did have more money later. But I remember one election I only spent $200.
My goodness.
So I always was pretty frugal.
I'll say. Well, you didn't use the media very much. You didn't
Not much. I did I advertised in papers.
Mm-hmm.
And once I even bought an ad on the radio. I was desperate that year. I thought I was going to lose.
Well, why did you win this first election when you didn't have any chance and you won anyhow?
I'm not sure. I think they thought I was dedicated and a hard worker and reliable. I'd always been interested in working in community affairs, 4-H, junior choir, church, whatever it was. When you have children, you know, you get involved in a lot of things.
Well, did you have anybody in your family or your husband's family that had been in the legislature?
Oh, yeah, Irving.
Irving. He was there before you?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
he was your brother-in-law, right?
yes. Mm-hmm. And my father-in-law was a representative how many years before me? 50.
Really?
Yeah. There was
Oh, that was the Niles family.
Yeah.
Okay. So what was your father-in-law's name?
Frank Niles.
So Frank Niles was in the legislature, and then Irving Niles was here. When was Irving elected? Was that in 70 or 72? Or?
No, it was before that. He served 3 different times. Maybe I don't remember.
Well, we can
first.
And just to sort of fill in time as you're changing, did the person you ran against your first time, was this an incumbent?
No.
Okay, so Dean Kirshner was your opponent.
Yes, he is a chiropractor. And I beat him, and he ran in this last election, too.
Oh, we did? That many years later?
Yes.
Huh.
And he was defeated again.
Mm-hmm. Who is the representative from this district now?
Freeman.
Oh, Jeff Freeman. And this is still the 17th district, which is what you...
Well,
it's probably different.
It's, 30th now?
Yeah, and the boundaries were changed just last year. So.
Yes.
Was it the 17th district the whole time you represented it? Okay.
However, the boundaries changed
Mm-hmm.
during...
Mm-hmm. What, in 79 or...
I don't remember.
Yeah, I believe they changed on the... Okay, while we're talking about your district, was it mainly urban or rural?
Rural. However, I had the south part of Emporia
Mm-hmm.
and all the small towns in Coffee County. Here's when my father-in-law, he was in 1928, he was House of Representatives.
Ah, here we are, Niles of Coffee, credited with deciding vote for
It was a highway
highway bill.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know him very well?
I never met him.
You never met him. No. Do you think that would have had any impact on your running, him having been there or anything, name or anything? Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the Niles family is well thought of in the county.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that's got to help in an election.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, did Irving work in your campaign at all for your election?
No.
Okay. Okay, let's see. Did we get enough about the district there? What counties? I think you told us, but let's just summarize what counties.
You got Coffee County, and you had
Part of Chase.
part of Chase.
Just the two counties.
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh, and Lyon County. The
And
lower part of Lyon County.
What issues then? If these were mainly rural people, what issues were they interested in?
Well, taxes, of course, and I don't even remember what they were.
Well, in your first election, and I guess in the others that followed it, did you focus on any of the issues, or was it mainly a non-issue type?
Non-issue.
What kind of things did you campaign on then?
Well, the fact that I was always interested in being a good member of the community and supporting community things that were good for the community.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt I could take that same talent, if it's a talent, and use it in the legislature.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know I remarried?
Mm-mm.
I just saw my husband drive.
Oh, no, I didn't.
So what is your name now?
Beatty.
B-E-A-T-T-I-E.
T-T-I-E.
Well, congratulations.
Yes. When was this now?
In January the 19th.
No wonder I didn't know.
No.
It hasn't been very long. Yeah,
We
well,
went together 52 years ago while I was in college, and he was in college. And then I started teaching, and he didn't have a car, so he could drive down. We both married different people, and our paths crossed this last fall, and
Well, my goodness. Isn't that interesting? That really is. Well, I believe when I think back on it, somebody asked me that they thought maybe that they'd heard you had remarried, but I hadn't heard that. And, well, that's great.
Is that your...
yes, that's our wedding picture.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah, that's really exciting too. Well, now, does he farm or?
No.
Hi. Hello.
Hi. Come on in, Linda.
I'm Sarah Tucker. I've just been congratulating your wife on your wedding. Congratulations to you, too.
Yeah, she's a beauty.
Hi, Barbara Burgess. How are you?
Well,
Hello, Mrs. Beatty.
how do you do?
She can't remember her last name.
Well, she certainly spoke right up and told us.
Yes, she did.
Oh, before you take your coat off, you might want to get the mail. I haven't got the mail.
Okay. Well, I got one of these things I got to take. You were there first.
All right. Now, where were we?
We're talking about issues. Okay.
Yeah.
We just talked about what you ran on. What issues were important during the years you were in the legislature? Were there
Oh,
many things, I'm sure?
you should have warned me to look this up.
Well, just we don't want a list or anything. We just want to. What do you remember as being more important than others?
Well, I remember one thing was the severance tax.
Mhm.
That was really
Mhm.
a burning issue. And waste disposal, I guess
Mhm.
that will always be
It
important.
just started though, probably during the years
Yes.
you were there, being a
Yes.
concern. Mhm.
And always taxes
Mhm.
and redistricting.
Oh yeah.
And that's another thing
Mhm.
that will always be important.
Mhm.
Women's issues were beginning to come to the fore,
Mhm.
and we heard some about abortion, but it wasn't the flaming issue that it was later. And strangely enough, I didn't get any, nobody said anything to me about abortion.
Hmm.
And you'd think they would have been real.
Yeah. Well, what other issues besides abortion were women's issues? And were the women expected to respond, the women in the legislature, expected to respond and sort of take leadership role in the passage of these issues?
Well, I suppose so, but basically they would just as well, the women issues had gone away, I think.
See that thing right there? I lost one of them. We're at asking for another.
Well, it was still, men were very polite, very chivalrous, but underneath there was still the good old boy feeling, you know. Now, I wasn't familiar with your husband enough to know that that's a right familiar. I mean,
I know what you mean, good, but that's okay.
will you exit? I mean,
I will. Sure.
So he may have been one of the ones who were more supportive of the women.
He was, but he was still a man.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know the younger men have been taught by their wives or their peers that women do have issues and rights to be where they are.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time it was, when I first went there, it was different.
Mm-hmm. And there were how many women that first year?
8.
There were 8.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you said it was quite different. In what respect? Were there women in leadership roles?
Oh, no.
No, not at all. Did women carry bills on the floor of the house?
Oh, yes. Of course, the 4 of us that were new were not. They always told you, you bide your time.
Mm-hmm.
The railings out. If you were a freshman legislature, they encouraged you to keep quiet and see how things were done.
Mm-hmm. Not just because you were a woman then, just because you were a freshman. Okay, how would you, if you could kind of put yourself in some category, how would you describe yourself? Are you a liberal or a conservative or somewhere in between, or what kind of a label if you...
I'm a conservative pretty much, but I'm a liberal on women's issues.
Mm-hmm.
One of the issues that I'd be working for now if I were there would be to get, and I know they are doing this, is to get more daycare centers where women are employed, like the State House. I see they're doing that. Blue Cross Blue Shield hires hundreds of women, and still they don't have a place. And I have a daughter that works there, and it just makes me furious to think. Better not say that.
Well, that's all right. I think that's a good position to do.
I think by all means they should have a place where they're help to bring their children.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there are other places across the state that would, the children and the women would both benefit, and in the long run, the companies that hire them would benefit.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned a minute ago being a freshman legislator and being told to kind of wait and learn the process and everything. Did you have a mentor during your period as a freshman legislature?
Ruth Wilkin was a lot of help.
Okay.
In fact, I was just looking in my book. She wrote me a nice note when she saw it, and she didn't know me when I was first elected, and welcomed me to the legislature.
I see. So she kind of took a leadership role there. Help you.
Yeah.
Did she help you get on committees and that kind of thing?
No one helped me.
What committees did you serve on the first term?
Energy and Natural Resources and Health and Welfare. I was on those 2 the whole time I was there. And I can't remember if I had a third one that wasn't too important. I doubt I did, but I don't know.
How did that change? You said you were on those two. Did you have any others?
Well,
years,
yeah. One time I was on elections for a while. I was on agriculture for a while. What else? Redistricting.
or?
Did you ask for them and get them, or did you just kind of get put on them? Or?
I asked for energy and natural resources because we have a Broke Creek watershed here, and my husband and I worked for 20 years to get a watershed, and you know about watersheds. And I was president of the Women's Magazine watershed. It is defunct now, many years past, but I'd always been working in watershed work, and I guess they thought that was a good reason to put me on energy and natural resources. And I was interested in women's issues, and I thought that public health and welfare I would get a share of them there.
Mm-hmm. Well, did you hold any leadership roles? Were you?
Well, I was vice chairman of health, energy and natural resources.
Mm-hmm. Can you describe, during the 10 years you were there, what was the power structure in the House? Who was the Speaker and so forth? You had kind of a change in there, didn't you?
Yes. There was once the Democrats were in charge.
You were there during the last time it happened. Yeah.
I saw history being made. And of course it was repeated this year.
Uh-huh.
That was, of course it really didn't make much difference in my respect. Same committee work.
Mm-hmm.
And you just read the bills and voted.
Mm-hmm.
But it gave you a kind of a hope that there was two parties in Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Kansas is better for the fact that there are two healthy parties, and they will look over each other's shoulders.
Okay.
Where did the work get done? I've talked to different people. Some say the committees were really where it was done, and others said it was really the floor. And where did you see most of the work done?
I think in committees. My opinion would be the committees. There's where you toss out what is unlikely and, well, most of what is unlikely, and weed out and amend to make it better. Of course, that's just the first step, but there's a lot of bills that should never make it to the floor, and that's where that weeding out transpires.
Do you think that has changed any?
I don't know.
Uh-huh.
I haven't kept track.
But during the 10 years you were there, that was pretty much the way the work was accomplished.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. What bills did you sponsor? Or, not all of them, but what ones do you remember the most? And
well, I wasn't one of the wheels, so I didn't have many bills passed. One of mine that touched women, I got a bill that would allow women who were, I forget the word. Are you a lawyer?
I'll give it a shot anyway.
Women who have been sentenced for minor things.
So it's not a felony, it's a misdemeanor?
Misdemeanor. Those women, up until that time, were sent to the federal prison.
Oh, my.
And I got a bill passed that would allow them to be in a work release or a jail close to where their families could visit them.
Were there any other bills?
Well, I had one about massage parlors, as you remember.
Tell us more.
Well, President Ford visited. I drove in every day up Highway 75, and there were these massage parlors. Yep. And that always made me so furious. And I tried, and of course, there were some people that weren't real eager to have those taken care of. And besides, they didn't want to discuss it too much on the floor of the house. And when President Ford drove in from the airport, "Hello, Mr. President," on these massage parlor signs. "Glad to have you in Topeka, Mr. President." Oh, that made me furious. Anyway, it looked like my bill was going down the tube, and on the last week, when things were going pretty fast, one of the bill writers said, "Hey, you can amend it into this library bill." Library. And this is so funny. A friend of my brother-in-law, Irving, well, he went to school with him in Lebo, had a wife who was, she worked in the library in Topeka, and he was carrying water for her, a bill that she would like to have passed. And he'd come in and visit with Irving, and he felt that this was his bill, pretty much, So on the floor of the house, I rushed up and got this amendment tacked on, and it passed, and he nearly died. Writing my good bill was a terrible amendment. Of course, he didn't know that once it was passed, it would never the twain shall meet again. He felt that it ruined it.
But your bill did pass, and that bill didn't pass. A rather big, major thing in a lot of ways. Well, that was definitely a memory. You probably have you remember a lot of the things people said and comments they made about that bill.
Because, in fact, one of the massage parlor owners came to visit me, and someplace I've got a little red card. Red.
Oh, that's interesting. Were there any other major issues or victories or defeats that you particularly remember?
No. I just remember reading all the bills and writing columns and answering letters and working hard. I have major achievements.
Before full time, we've got to be out 31st.
We do. Gee, we're going to have to record quick then.
Without me, she wouldn't get a spot.
You can't believe a word he says.
Oh, I just haven't made a little bit of stories.
How would you describe the job of being legislator that you did for 10 years? What was it that you were doing?
I was serving the people. Really, when you're teaching school, you're doing about the same thing as you are as a legislator. You're doing a lot of reading, planning, working for the whole community. And I just transferred what I did in one profession to another.
That's
That's
interesting.
the way I felt. You know, the friendships you made there were so great, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Even though your paths aren't going to cross too many times, you look back on those days and think, those were good days, even though they weren't all good days.
Now, I want to go back to how many women were in the house when you first went in. You said there were
8.
8. That included you.
Yes.
And when you retired, how many?
I'm not sure, probably.
But the number had increased.
Oh, yes, probably
Probably doubled.
20.
Oh,
I don't know.
We can look that up, but I just wanted to kind of get an idea. Well, now, you were there you were one of the ones that were elected at the first time in the history of Kansas when there were more than 4 women in the House at the same time.
Yes.
From that year on, the number of women has grown every year.
Yes.
Why? What happened in that year? What caused this change?
Well, I think people just became more aware that women were entities with the same talents as men, and sometimes had more time. Well, they took more time to delve into what needed to be studied, studying the bills, and I knew some people, both Republicans and Democrats, who didn't do much studying. I knew some that never answered their mail. They tossed it. And all the women that I knew were hard workers and were I've reached the spot where I can't come up with the word.
You're doing great.
Yeah, you are.
Well, do you think that something happened in that year, but the year you ran for office the first time?
No, I don't.
There were a lot of more women than usual running, or?
I don't even
You don't remember?
that. But
You were probably part of it, and you don't look at it from the same
maybe.
way.
But I think people trust women.
Okay, you
There
think
is
it's
a
a trust
trust.
factor there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's interesting. Why did you end your legislative services?
Well, I had been there a good time, and my husband had been diagnosed with cancer, and I thought I needed to be here. We needed
It
to.
was right at the end of that last year, or was it your last? Can't
Well,
remember.
I think it was 2 years that we knew he had cancer, but he was doing well. And there came a time, though, that I knew I had to not run again.
Okay, you want to go on with some questions? Or?
You were there 10 years. Did you see women's role in the legislature change as there were more of you and as the men got more used to you?
Yes,
perhaps?
yes. Especially, I can't speak for the Republican Party because I don't remember all that much, but women, I'm sure it's true, the Republican Party, women got to hold deciding seats in the caucuses. And in the morning sessions before we went to session in the Republican and Democrat. What do you call those?
Well, your caucus.
Caucus. Yeah. You see, I've been away a long time.
Perspective. Perspective.
They were elected to a minor post or two, and that's changed now, and that's wonderful. And
Well, let's ask you some questions just about you personally now. Are you a native Kansan? Were you born right around here?
at Reading.
And tell us a little bit about your family and growing up and parents and brothers and sisters.
Well, I was born in 1919, and we lived on a farm. I was the only child. Things were hard. I went, and all of us older ones went through this same period when everything was, there wasn't any extra money, you know. But we didn't know we were poor. We enjoyed life and had plenty to eat. My mother sewed, made my clothing, and I had nice clothing. So, and I did get to go to one-year college. My mother knew. She was an intelligent woman. She knew that the only way up was to go to college. So I went 1 year.
Where did you go?
Emporia State. There weren't many professions open to women at that time except nursing and teaching, and I knew I would never make a nurse.
So that's why you became a teacher.
Yes. And so I got a school right after that, a rural school. And this is a little different. They asked me, the school board asked me if I'd
Rather have
$65 a month or $60 a month and a used piano. So I took the $60 a month and a used piano. And they bought a used piano and they delivered it the day before school started. And that night the schoolhouse burned down. But somebody had thrown away a cigarette, you know, when they delivered the piano. So I taught the first year of school in a house, a living room of a house.
Oh, forget. How many students did you have?
I had 8, but I didn't have all 8 grades.
Well, getting back to your schooling, what kind of a grade school, elementary school did you attend?
I went out first my mother taught me at home. She said, they've got some of these teachers that come out here aren't very good. I think I could teach you better. And they gave me we moved to Reading then, and they gave me an intelligence test and put me in the 4th grade when I went in.
So you never were in grades 1, 2, and 3. You just started in 4th.
And I graduated from high school when I was 15.
My goodness.
And I was 16 when I started to college. And I was 17 when I first started teaching. But they knew I was 17. They probably broke the law or something.
Now, was 1 year of college just enough, or
3 years state certificate.
My goodness.
Yeah, then you could renew that. Is that
I think for 3 years.
however,
All went on every summer, and there's lots of teachers that did this. I'd take summer school, night school, correspondence, Saturdays, and finally I ended up with a Harvard. There, I taught 5 years, and then I got married, and I thought I'll never teach again, because they didn't hire women married women, you might get pregnant.
Mm.
So, but we had 5 children, and when the oldest 2 got ready to go to college, you knew that a farmer couldn't get 2 kids at a time through college. So I went back to teaching, and I finally got my master's.
Just by here and there classes,
Yeah.
and that's really the hard way to do it.
Oh, yeah.
My goodness.
But a lot of women have done that. A lot.
Well, did you belong to any organizations? Did you belong to your professional teaching organizations or any other organizations that might maybe help prepare you for being in the legislature in any sense?
I belong to KNEA, but
That doesn't.
no, that's the only one I belong to.
How about any social organizations or women's clubs or 4-H?
Oh yeah, 4-H.
Did you belong to that as you were growing up?
Yes, I belong. I was in it till I went to college.
Were you real active and
Yes.
gave speeches and learned parliamentary procedure?
Oh, well, my parliamentary procedures was great, you know. You can tell somebody who's had 4-H on the floor of the House. Yeah, you can.
Did you, you were a leader then in 4-H when your children were in it too? Is that
Yes.
right? Did I hear you say
Yes.
that earlier? Then do you think that would have been, would you categorize that as something that helped you in your legislative service then? Or your
I
effectiveness?
suppose. Not a lot, but some.
And how many years did you teach and what did you teach?
Well, I taught rural schools until I got married. I taught at one that burned down, and that closed, of course. Then I went down to Greenwood County and taught in a 2-teacher school for 4 years. And then I went to Osage City and taught 6th grade for 14 and a half years. So altogether I taught 19 and a half years.
Sixth grade was what you were teaching when you ran for office.
Yes.
My goodness.
And then did you stop teaching?
I've never even substituted.
I understand you're missing quite an experience.
However, I do volunteer work up at school.
Do you? How old were you when you were elected to office?
Let's see. That was 74 and 19.
Only 54 or 55, does that sound right?
I think 55.
How old were your children when you were elected then? These are all hard questions.
Well, I need some paper.
When were your children born?
Oh, don't ask me that. Okay. You have 5 children.
Yes.
You said that they were still at home.
Well, 3 of them were. I had 2 in college and 3 in high school. That's as close as
Okay, that was